The FBI has uncovered a plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan. Meanwhile, President Trump's upset that Attorney General Bill Barr still hasn't uncovered the plot to uncover the Russia-Collusion plot. Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, this gets all rather complicated, and these stories really have nothing to do with each other, except the fact that the Department of Justice, U.S., is involved in both of them. I'm not going to get into tremendous detail because facts roll out in these breaking stories so quickly that by the time people hear this story, they're going to go, well, you guys don't even know what you're talking about because such and such has just happened. But in any case, the criticism that I'm hearing already as the news breaks that there was a plot among some 13 co-conspirators to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, as well as to cause other kinds of mayhem and potentially spark a civil war. That got uncovered in relatively short order. Meanwhile, President Trump is publicly saying that he's disappointed with the pace of John Durham's investigation that is overseen, of course, by the Attorney General of the United States, Bill Barr. Disappointed at the pace of that investigation into exactly how that Russia collusion probe got started. Bill, are these two completely unrelated stories, or should we read anything into this?
Well, they're both being investigated by the FBI, so they have that in common. But I think doesn't seem to be a big stretch of imagination for me to assume that a cover-up that had been in place for a year at least, involving top-level government officials and multiple numbers of people who were already in the security business, in the intelligence business, that would be a tougher nut to crack than a bunch of anarchists getting together and trying to kidnap somebody. If you ask me which one of those two plots would be easier to unravel, I would go with B. And so I don't see that there's any difference in terms of how
now let me clarify there. B means the easier to unravel plot would be the kidnapping plot?
Yes, obviously.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing. That's the kind of thing that the FBI traditionally does very, very well. And needless to say, one of the major things complicating the and slowing down the other case, the case that President Trump expressed displeasure over the delay. One of the reasons there is that one of your main investigative bodies is implicated in the cover-up. I mean, that means there's not only going to be a tremendous amount of stonewalling and just slowing things down, and that's a strategy, by the way, because if Joe Biden is elected, then this problem will go away for the people who committed this act of treason back in 2016.
I suppose one might also argue that the attempted kidnappers, so-called, are doing this for the first time, but the people who are covering things up in government have a long history of experience in doing such things.
That's kind of my point. Yeah. The people who are covering up the collusion probe, Hillary Clinton, who apparently instigated the whole thing. Barack Obama, we now know, was briefed on it and didn't do anything. These are people with a long, long history of, at the very, very, very least, of double talk and double think in terms of explaining things, but basically who are criminals. And this is not only a felonious offense. It's a coup. It's been an ongoing coup for 4 years. So I actually feel like the constant release of documents that we've seen over the last 6 months, which get more and more incriminating every time, I personally feel like that is a better way to deal with this than dumping all of it at once. However, I think the Justice Department had better move pretty fast and make sure that at the very least, the full case of evidence is out and presented to the American people before January 20th of 2021, if Donald Trump loses the election. I don't think he's going to, but if he does, then this window to prosecute those people is going to close very quickly.
Well, U.S. Attorney John Durham, who's heading up this probe into the origins of the Russia-Collusion probe, has a history of being somewhat of a, some people would call him a plotter. Other people would call him prudent and careful and building his case. In a sense, as you pointed out, he does have a more difficult task when you're putting together a case against somebody like a Hillary Clinton, or even, as President Trump has suggested, it may rise as high as former President Barack Obama, that you better have everything buttoned down and nailed down down and firmly in place before you go out with these allegations, as you have previously noted. Former FBI Director James Comey essentially did a long probe about Hillary Clinton and said, well, we found a lot of stuff, but we really can't nail her on it.
Right. So you now are dealing with two conflicting demands, and you have to adjust to those demands. I'm speaking of I'm sorry, I forgot the guy's name who was doing the actual investigation.
John Durham.
Yeah. So on one hand, you want things done as meticulously as possible, and you make an excellent point. When you're dealing with politics at this level, it has to be airtight. Given the media, well, I don't even know what to say about the media. Given the extent that the Democratic Party is able to launch loudspeakers into the culture, this has to be airtight, because if there's any flaw in this case whatsoever, unlike the Donald Trump case where there was no evidence whatsoever, the precise opposite will happen here. If there's one area in there that's not tacked down real hard, that will be trumpeted to show that the whole thing was basically invented by Donald Trump as a form of revenge. But at the same time, you do have time pressures that are fundamental and important, and you can get to the point where the perfect is the enemy of the good. A good plan executed in a timely fashion is far, far better than a perfect plan executed too late.
What's more important at this stage in the game? Because the critique from the right is, and from the president, frankly, on his attorney general and his U.S. attorney, is that this needs to come out before the election, because people need to know what an administration that Joe Biden was part of did in the course of this ginning up of the Russia-Collusion probe. So which is more important, letting the American voters know before the final election day, as I'm now calling it, or getting it right so that people go to jail who deserve to go to jail?
If Donald Trump and the Republicans cannot win this election and maintain the presidency and the Senate, then it's not going to matter how well prepared the case is. The case will vanish, and everybody knows it. Furthermore, I don't know why this is not the primary weapon of the Trump campaign on a daily basis. And I mean on a daily basis. This is what these ads should be hammering home every day. There should be ads out there. The president should spend whatever money he's got and then raise some more to put out ads that show FBI evidence indicates that this whole view of Donald Trump is an invention of the Democratic Party, and it has been made possible to succeed with the willing cooperation of the so-called news media. I would put documents with an FBI logo on the top of them on an ad, and I would run a new ad every single day, and I would make sure that the entire country, prior to Election Day, which is already passed, by the way, for millions of Americans, Election Day is already passed. This of all this, I know it's not related to the subject, and we've talked about it before, but this idea of an election season is insane. It's insane. And if I understand correctly, you can still vote after Election Day. Is that right?
That's not right, but there are some states where they're challenging how soon the mail-in ballots have to be in. Like, for example, if they come in 3 days after the election, will they still be counted?
But they have to be postmarked prior to the election.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the details of that.
No, I'm just curious. Yeah, I'm just curious because
frankly,
that is a nightmare.
I did not prep for that.
No, it's just a nightmare. But in any event, I'm just talking about the fact that the election, if this was handled skillfully, the election could turn on this. In fact, if it were me running the Trump campaign, I would make sure that the election turned on this. I would turn this into not only a conspiracy on the part of the Democrats to overthrow the government, and I would tie that into their unwillingness to say that they won't pack the courts, to simply say when Democrats lose, then all they do is change the rules. And I would make that the entire circle, and everything you know about Donald Trump that you've heard from these people is wrong. I would make that the campaign ad. And if that meant going before everything was perfect, then I think that is a much, much better plan. And by the way, they're not mutually exclusive. You can continue to run ads and and make political mileage out of what has already been released if it's done in such a way carefully, it shouldn't prejudice the case when it's eventually finished. But you can't have this investigation go on until 2023.
So previously, President Trump has been accused, and during his impeachment hearings, we heard much of the fact that he or his cohorts and colleagues were trying to interfere with investigations. This is what President Trump said publicly in an interview on Fox Business. To be honest, Bill Barr, the U.S. Attorney General, Bill Barr is going to go down as either the greatest Attorney General in the history of the country, or he's going to go down as, a very sad situation. Later in the same interview, he's got all the information he needs. They want to get more. They keep getting more. And I said, you don't need any more. Bill, doesn't that sound like the President of the United States interfering with an investigation?
No, it sounds to me like a person who is aware of the fact that this is not a one equation game, a one variable equation is what I meant to say. And the same thing is true with COVID-19. I think you could make a very tight analogy between those two. Bill Barr and let's just say Dr. Fauci have a job to do. Fauci's job is to make sure that the fewest number of Americans die from COVID-19. Bill Barr's job is to make sure that the case against these criminals is as airtight as possible. That's their job, and that's their only job. The President of the United States has to weigh those two imperatives against other factors. In the case of COVID-19, he has to weigh it against the fact that the country is dying and that businesses are closing and that there is not an infinite timeline to do this. And likewise, he also has time pressures with regard to the election coming up, because if he loses this election, it doesn't matter how many charges, as I said before. It doesn't matter how perfect the case is. It will disappear into the Biden-Harris Justice Department. It will just simply vanish. So in this case, it's not a question of, well, let's wait till we get it right. It's a question of, look, just by happy coincidence, I just finishing up a script on the Doolittle Raiders, on the raid on Tokyo in 1942. And they were detected 400 miles further away than they were thinking they would be detected. And then the question became, do we wait until we get the mission we want, or do we go now and crash in the ocean? But at least we go. And to me, they made the right decision then, and I think Trump is making the right decision here when he says we need something that we can go to now. If you give me a complete report on January 21st, or for that matter, on November 5th or 3rd or 4th, that's not going to help anything. I think he's right about this.
Barr has indicated that there will be no complete report before November 3rd, the final election day. There will also be unlikely to be any indictments before then. This is what has triggered top Republicans to start putting pressure on the president to, by executive fiat, release documents that he has previously asked the Justice Department to release. Here's a White House official that's quoted in a news story, so I can give attribution, on Axios.com. And it says, quote, this is a White House official, unnamed, being quoted, Bill Barr should follow the instructions of the president to declassify and release all the documents the FBI are sitting on. There's no good reason for him to withhold this information. Bill, do you agree that the president, again, in what could appear to be fiddling around with an investigation in process, release all the documents that the FBI doesn't want released yet?
This is a perfect example of how much of the bumbling tyrant image is attributed to Trump, when all he is a person who has to make decisions based on the real world situation he finds himself in. There is an election coming up, and there is a party that is running that is responsible for the crimes. This is not an investigation into something that happened in Somalia. This is an investigation of the top level of the Democratic Party. And this will have an effect on the election if it's released in time. And furthermore, if it's not, then these charges will simply go away. So when people say Donald Trump is meddling with Dr. Fauci, or Dr. Trump or President Trump is meddling with Bill Barr, what he is basically doing is bringing a sense of reality to the table and saying it would be lovely if we could spend 2 years locked down without any consequences, including psychological ones. But that's not going to happen. It's worse than the disease. So we have to make a compromise. And if that compromise means getting people out there earlier and having more people die than would have died if they were kept in individual cells for the next 2 years, then that's the choice we have to make. And he's got the same exact choice here. He has to decide at what point is good enough. And if you go past the good enough point, at the last minute of the good enough point, then you are in danger of losing everything. And I completely agree with the president on this, completely. This is a political act on the part of the Democrats. This is a political coup that was formed in 2016, the end of 2016, when Donald Trump surprised everybody. It was a political action. It is a political animal, and its consequences will be felt in the election coming up in 3 weeks.
Is it a political stall by the Attorney General and his U.S. Attorney?
I don't think so. I don't get the feeling that Bill Barr is. Again, see, this is the nice thing about it. When you have this, when you understand the dynamic, you don't have, then if you understand the dynamic, then Trump doesn't have to be an idiot, and Fauci doesn't have to be an idiot, and Bill Barr doesn't have to be an idiot, and none of them have to be traitors either. You have to understand that they have different, it may seem like Trump and Fauci and Trump and Barr are all going in the same direction, and to some degree they are, but they also have conflicts in terms of where is the risk-reward balance? At what point do we say that going further and making this stronger is going to be worse than not going at all? And certainly in the case of COVID-19, we passed that point in May at the latest, if I was being generous. And we are rapidly approaching the point where this revelation of the evidence is not going to be able to affect the election, and it should, because it's about stealing the last one. And I think Americans have a right to know about that before they vote for these people again.
The members of BillWhittle.com have made this program possible. You can join them by going to BillWhittle.com and clicking that big green Become a Member button. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.